Directed Commission of Aapresid. Good afternoon. Be welcome to this 32nd Aapresid Congress. Everything is connected. It is my pleasure to be here with you and with three friends at a panel in order to talk about this 360 vision and the conversations that would have to bring us together. Let me introduce them in more detail to you. Teco is an agricultural engineer. He's a historical member of Aapresid, and Manuel Pereira, a great communicator. Lisandro is an advisor in public narratives, and for over 2 years he founded and has been running the Global Network Narrative Institute. Iván Ordoñez is an economist specialized in agribusiness. He's a professor at USEMA, and he's a friend to our house. The three of them are. By way of introduction, something we see all the time. It's not exclusive of the agricultural business or of Argentina. The divides that separate us so much, pro-Agenda 2030, those who are against, those in favor of climate change, those against, those in favor of killing the whales, those against. We always find a divide, a crack that separates us together. Argentina is a specialist, actually, in finding ways to be divided. The agri-business could not be separated from it or immune to it. And I wonder why in a country that has the biggest basin for photosynthesis in the world and one of the biggest and best soils in the planet are not capable to get together and collectively decide where Argentina should be going, where Argentina should be developed into. And we need to unwalk the path of division so that they share experiences and opinions in connection to this. And let's start thinking, because we want the audience to participate. It's no longer the structure of two people coming and lecturing on us and the public or the audience listening to them. This would rather have to be a meeting, a discussion among lots of people, where there's three that may have a higher say, if you will, but we all want to listen to each other. If Aapresid's motto is true, then no one knows best than when we exchange together. The first question for Beko. You were the president of SAIAFA a few years ago. You were the evil for agricultural engineers, the gatekeeper for them. And what about your experience there, and how did you turn this into something that helped you be better and better? Thank you, Santi. Thank you to our colleagues from the regional office. And I am quite committed with the fundamental production of our country. I'd like to thank Ivo and Lisandro for joining the panel to engage in conversation. This is the idea. There's microphones in the audience. There's a lot of people who are friends, and it would be good if someone would be hard on this. Sometimes we do not know whether this has to do with social media or not. I've been in the social media for a long time. Some started less time ago. He knows how aggressive people can be. They are in Twitter, and you sometimes get a message. You don't really know what it serves. And this happens sometimes. I started noticing that there was a new divide, as Santi said. But this is part of the agricultural ecosystem that is us around the table here. the agro ecosystem, I mean, we are a lot of people. We know it. It's not just those who produce or those who invest with a risk and with restrictions, but the number of colleagues that are working on this for things to be done well. The truck driver and those who live in the provinces know what the field generates, and the differences between a year when there is a drought and the differences when the climate is more favorable. We get to see this in our communities. And as part of this ecosystem in the agriculture field, I started finding a very strong divide. Those that are in the agricultural ecosystem may have seen it. There's lots of people that are not. And I don't know whether it is seen from outside, but I was saying, well, we are on the same boat. Why is there so much hatred to others? The enemy is not part of our boat. Why is that divide? Why is this happening? And well, all of a sudden, on the 15th, I thought about the idea to see whether some external people could come along and help us out to see what was actually happening. Beginning on that and on the fact that a panel was no longer available, and Peko said, well, just create another panel for today, then I got it together. I would have loved for Guara Noes to have joined us. If you don't know who she is, please Google her and watch some video in YouTube. She's wonderful, and she really works hard when it comes to these things. She thinks in terms of the other. She tries to solve these divides and whatnot. All that we are living through with social media, which, as I say, there's lots of advantages, but they also carry with them a more negative side. In answering your question, I should say, yes, I did feel that there was some sort of aggression. There are different professionals here. There are psychologists, there are economists. There's different professions. And professional associations don't have a good image. I worked a long time ago when I was part of the directive commission of Aapresid. I worked with Lisandro. We worked really good, and then I asked him to join the school. But agronomy, agricultural engineers are very focused on Excel. We found it difficult to change the narrative, but he gave us quite a lot of help in our institution. So I love the fact that you are here. But that is what I saw. And the most amazing thing is that you find yourself with that person who might be on the other end of that gap or of that divide. In Expo Agro, you hug him and you take a selfie. So when we say, well, we are killing each other in a very bloody way, and I will just give one example, and I will then call it short, but a person, a woman, who works in the agro system, yesterday in Twitter, in connection to this presentation, she said INTA and Aapresid are all identified with the Kirchner administration, a left-wing party. So how will you make this sort of assumption? But this is what this shows. Placing yourself in a role where things are either black or white. There are no grays in the middle. And a tweet by Lisandro made me think. He spoke about institutions and organizations that are gray, but that will remain for later on. Thank you so much, and that's a very good reflection. A situation where everything is black or white, you won't be next to me ever again because you have a different stance in life. This divides us, and we need to find a way to solve it. I heard you many times talk about collectives and how a generalized consensus on one given thing turns it into a collective asset. You always talk about fences. Fences are a limit that are out there, but no one stops me from cutting it and from taking soybeans with me or from taking a cow with me. But this is a collective asset. We know limits. I wouldn't think about doing this. I spoke about the biggest basin for photosynthesis in the world. And it's not that many of us. Why cannot we agree and say, let's go for it together? Let's not keep struggling whether we do no-till or something else. Let's move into that direction and let's be successful. We have to take a look at other countries that have done so. Why is it that as institutions or as farmers we cannot have this agro-collective view and then move on to a prosperous future? I'd like to thank you all for coming here. I'd like to welcome you all. A decade ago or over a decade ago, I've been attending Aapresid congresses. It is the first time in the city of Buenos Aires. It's so nice for me to have it at home because it's home to all Argentinians, Buenos Aires, I mean. And to, well, the day you graduated was the highest point in your life, Peko. And I would like to welcome your daughter because then everything went down the hill. And welcome to being an economist to her. If we go on to the reflection that Peko and Santi were inviting us, let me be a little bit more brutal, because otherwise, if you are too elliptic in your definition, we don't end up understanding what is it that we are discussing. In summarizing it, and well, largely speaking, there are three great views on the role of the farm in Argentina and what it is here for. There is one I'm not interested in discussing because it is too far from any proactive propositions. That is the Kirchner planet of tax withholdings, the differentiated exchange rate, and the ban on exports. I have not much to discuss or exchange with that sector, but how do I go about convincing the majority of them that this is the wrong way to go about this sector in Argentina, so that it is no longer decapitalized? I don't have much to say when someone says withholdings are okay and we have to forbid wheat exports. I'm not excited in this conversation. But then there are two big groups that, quote unquote, summarize two visions that are faced against each other. Santi and Peko, from an integral point of view, said there has to be a synthesis. There has to be a moment where we all agree and we collectively see what has to be done with agro in Argentina from all points of view, privately, from the fence, in, collectively as a sector, and from the public policies, the state and the sector. These two visions are based on a value system and on a system of interests that make it quite difficult to make them come to terms with one another. Hence the idea to speak down on Aapresid. When they say Aapresid and INTA are Kirchnerists, they are a corporation of the worst I can ever imagine. That's in their jargon. So there was a lot of noise around this Congress in connection to the role of Aapresid and the role in the sector, this role in the sector, Aapresid's role in the sector. And this is where the two logics for reality to be interpreted may be applied to this. The value produced by the countryside or by the farm is from the fence behind. And those that are participating in the system, in brutal terms, as is many times stated by those that speak about this, are parasites that are mounted on that value to sell services or goods. And I don't understand how these get sold if they are of no use. But in that narrative, they parasite the agricultural producer. There is no such terms such as system or morality. There is just a farmer who has a farm, and he's the only that produces value. The rest don't produce any value. In an extreme situation, the value will therefore be one that, when I was really young and studied economy, they explained it was physiocratic. The value was related to the land and to the deed of the land. Well, the first thing is this is not accurate. It's not like that. I was lucky to go to Ghana with Agustin Bianchini to see whether any agriculture was possible there. That is commercial, competitive agriculture at a global level, because they do agriculture in Ghana. Of course, they have 1,000 kilos of corn per hectare. This is agriculture just as it is, without knowledge. It rains on the soil 1,000 kilos per hectare. So up front, that argument is strange enough. But that argument, it encompasses a trap. If value in agriculture is given by the deed on the piece of land on which water falls, and I therefore produce grains, well, let's withhold on those profits, because the value is just the water that falls from heaven or from the sky. Let's levy withholdings. So that view on the fact that everything depends on the land and the event is a productive one in isolation from a system bears a lot of problems. And this is the one on which the idea that there is no convergence between Aapresid's objectives and those of the agricultural business in its whole. Then there's another one that I am more interested in.
And that's the vision where there's no farmer, there's nothing like that. There's a whole agribusiness sector with different actors that are all competing to see who adds value and who doesn't. And with market mechanisms, they redistribute the value that is generated. What I say is basically what is studied at all the economy colleges worldwide, the same as what our Minister of Economy studied, or Jerome Powell, that manages the Fed, or the Minister of Economy, both of Lula and Bolsonaro. They all attended the same college and studied the same. And when there's no correct distribution of value, there's a market failure. This is very important. There's a monopoly, there's some kind of problem that inhibits the correct distribution of value generated. And that market failure is regulated. And that is how, for instance, what I'm saying here is not science fiction. The U.S. has just won, the U.S. government has just won a lawsuit against Google for the monopoly of the searches. As when I was younger, and they won a lawsuit against Microsoft for joining the operating system with Microsoft Explorer and Microsoft Windows 95. Perhaps many of you do not understand what I mentioned because you hadn't even been born when we used Windows 95. So in that vision, where we have a system where we all contribute value, everybody is more or less important. And that vision leads to logics of performance. Now, that vision is complex. It is sustained based on interests, on values, based on different perspectives. And I'm personally interested in that because it contains a key argument, and that is that the value in the business sector is given by knowledge. And that idea is very powerful. Because when I want to discuss with somebody that wants to apply withholdings, I say this doesn't happen because it rains. It happens because there's knowledge. And knowledge, besides, doesn't belong to the owner of the land. It belongs to the one that studied, that made an effort. It is meritocratic. So it's an inclusive discourse that includes the whole of society. When we accept a vision, the vision that Aapresid is harmful for the system, and that's why it has to be eliminated, we are accepting that agriculture only requires soil and rainfall. And that's why, for me, this situation in the latest weeks is particularly bad because there are many things to improve. Actually, in the criticism against certain visions of Aapresid, there are many things we have to listen to. And what I cannot tolerate is that the idea of the best Aapresid is the Aapresid that is burning. That's why I said I'm more brutal. So the logic here is, if we want to win the discussion, we will not win it by discussing, we'll win it by talking, not just by offering the other cheek for the other one to hit us. We have to listen to the criticism and we have to use it to be better. That's a challenge for Aapresid. It's a permanent challenge for Aapresid. Aapresid was founded with an essential principle, that is the dissemination of knowledge on no-till. When Aapresid started, it was marginal. Today, Aapresid is the establishment, and it has to reinvent itself. That's why it has to listen to criticism. It doesn't mean that being like the punching ball of anybody, just listening to be better. Thank you. You were brutal, actually. The truth is that we take your words as we are at Aapresid. We are disruptive. We will listen to you. We will implement those ideas. And we're going to listen to the others to try and change reality. Perhaps sometimes putting the other cheek because it's the way we do things. But I'm sure we're going to make a change. We will analyze it internally, and we will decide it among the members. Let's see if we have to make the change or if we don't. The warning is there. If we want to close the divide, we will have to do something about it. We will create a commission. Okay, and now I would like to pass the floor to Lisandro. I saw him taking notes in his phone. He's analyzing these narratives. So I would like you to make a summary, if possible, of what we've been discussing. And then think what you're going to say, because you have to take the floor. Raise your hands. You have 30, 40 seconds to say what you think about this, some ideas, because this is what we are at Aapresid, a permanent brainstorming to build the future. Well, first of all, thank you to all the participants. I don't know if you're here because you're interested or because you're tired of being standing. I'm going to try and be as loyal as I am as when I work. That is, being connected with what is being said. What I hear is a level of dispersion and a big generalistic snapshot that is going to take us anywhere. It's like everybody's here to say what they feel like saying. That makes me think, if I were working with a customer, is there a true problem? Where does it hurt? Otherwise, if we follow the cooperativist logic, well, we go to the supermarket and discuss, you see what he published? Well, we are not really seeing if there's a problem. Having said that, saying that everybody has their own discourse, I have a couple of notes about what has connected me with Aapresid for a long time. After listening, traveling to the territories, I have met here many people from La Pampas, from the Midwest, and particularly to contribute two aspects that are techniques, communication and narrative techniques that I am serving. And their suggestion is something can be done in this sense, because I've been working with Aapresid for 2 years. So the first thing that I have here in my notes is forget about Aapresid, forget about agribusiness, forget about thinking of the verticals. Our attention span is absolutely at a loss. I had difficulties following them. I know the routine, but it was very difficult for me to follow because perhaps I have a 2-year-old and it's difficult for me. Greetings to her. She's at the hotel. But the truth is that our attention is so broken down because of this, the infinite scrolling, that, to put it specifically, this makes us follow individuals, but not topics, not institutions. I follow bumper crop, but not so much what happened, what Torres said at the speech the first day, I imagine, the president of Aapresid. So we follow people, not visions, because we can't otherwise. We follow Millet, not his party. We follow a reality show character. Here we're not looking for a good TV series. We look for strong characters that are always helping revalidate a purchase, another chapter, revalidate all the midterm elections. That is always the standard for communication studies, to follow individuals. And that's a key technical aspect. That is, does Aapresid have the face of a person, or does it have the face of the regional offices? I've been collaborating with the farming sector for a long time, and Iván has a phrase that says, farmers that have the face of a lot of land in their profile picture. Those are the great institutions. No matter the papers they publish or the knowledge they have, there's no way to reach them. So today we follow individuals, and that's why those that distill hate or create controversies are so effective. So the first big question that I launched to you is Aapresid as an organization willing to push specific individuals? And you may say, yes, actually, we do it with Aula. The farmers are left alone. We just push them and then we leave them on their own. I saw it in the territory. I say this because I've observed it. So it's very important to understand whether there is a willingness to change this. And second, it's very it's very easy to beat Aapresid, Inca, CONICET. It's very easy to punch an institution. It's more expensive to punch an individual. This is common sense, but a narrative technical model since the first fire was created. It's called a low-intensity antagonism. It's more similar to the Mexican catch. Yeah, it's an entertainment. The institution suffers the bullying, but the person, even if it's a fake profile, we don't even know their name, it's one person that is writing in the social media and creates that low-intensity antagonism, and it's very effective. So my second question to you is, would Aapresid be willing to push individuals with a specific point of view and to support them in a public ring, in a hot conversation, public conversation? That's a standard of work today, to have a serious lobbying, a serious defense of the interests in such an important pie as is the agricultural sector. So here I'm trying to say we shouldn't ask the farmer for more than they can give. If there's a farmer that can be the face of Aapresid, well, can Aapresid give public legitimacy to it? And then a couple more things to finish. That is, inside the limits of the law or outside. When I initially contacted Aapresid, the invoices were made in paper. When I presented my first invoices to Aapresid, there was a problem with the trucks that had the Monsanto label on them. What I see now is another thing. These are communities. Communities are being created. Influencers, for instance, this is why I've been invited here. Why influencers in agriculture work so well? Because they are creating their own Aapresid, their own communities of 200, 2,000, 60,000, 100,000 people, and they are generating a conversation that can affect decision makers. They can affect Milei or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They destabilize those that are very high, and they have a lack of oxygen, so they're very sensitive to public opinion. Perhaps it's not the logic brought from France, from the CREAS. Today, the new regional offices are created in the digital world, so these influencers that have a biased perspective, perhaps they don't agree with Aapresid, they're doing it better. They're doing it very well. They are truly creating communities that are pushing decision makers. So I wouldn't consider whether it's within or outside the laws, but their ability to create digital communities. And finally, when I had to work for AFA and ATA for the youth, there was a question that is, well, our youth is not participating in our grassroots communities. What happens with the youth? How do we motivate them? And going a little upstream in cooperativism, I have this version, then perhaps you can challenge it. But part of the cooperative logic started when a person was dying and his family couldn't afford the funeral. So the community said, okay, let's all put some money every day or every month, so when one dies and cannot afford their funeral, they can have a decent funeral. That is cooperativism, the logic of dosing every day. And I don't see that in Aapresid and in many of my customers. That is, where is the vocation for communicating a little every day and not waiting for a very well-designed lobby to say, you, INTA, Aapresid, are Kirchnerists. What are you doing? What dosing are you doing in terms of communication? Well, I throw these ideas. As this is a panel for a discussion, I don't have solutions. So if you want solutions, let's work on it.
Acá Ivo tenía una acotación sobre el tema.
Yo tenía un punto que me parecía importante.
I have something there, something that Lisandro mentioned that I think is important. Those networks that are created, that are quite informal, would be more successful, or more or less that is what you said. And this is very interesting. To be against something, we need a low-intensity connection. We don't need to talk a lot or collaborate or agree. I mean, it's easy to be against something. And in agriculture, we've seen that with withholdings. So we are all against tax withholdings. And we are speaking of this in this panel because in this sector we are all against tax withholdings, but we do not all agree on how we should remove the withholdings. It's very easy to be against something. Those networks work well and very fast to be against something. For instance, to be against the transparency and sustainability agenda that is pushed by Aapresid. It's very easy. And it's extremely difficult to create a sustainability and transparency agenda. Now, the point is, the agriculture of the future, what is it like? Is it with knowledge and with the 3 pillars of sustainability truly working or not? For me, these are not equivalent visions. Here, I'm sorry, I'm from the 20th century here. It's not they think this, we all think something. No, we are right. And we shouldn't apologize for being right. The question is, when they criticize us, perhaps they are right in some things. And if they are, again, we should work to be better. And that is more difficult because, again, it means working to be better. Being in the side of the road and saying Syngenta and Aapresid are Kirchneris, it's easy. It's just a tweet. And I'm upset because, I don't know, it's a tweet, but the community behind is issuing that. And that happened with Milei. He's a freak, and there were 7 million people very silently amplifying that. So the challenge there is a true, honest conversation does not even imply being effectively listening to the other. To have an honest conversation, I don't need to have that other person there that says the best Aapresid is the one that is burning just in front of me. Very quickly, that can generate a non-communication, very quickly. A true communication is saying, well, if transparency and sustainability systems are not correctly designed, and finally they end up ruining the agricultural business, well, the one that was complaining was right in some aspects. So the question is, how genuine is the complaint? And what can we take from that complaint to be better? Because we're not going to win the discussion by discussing. This is no question of wills and of being right and of convincing the other. Many of these people that are so vocal against Aapresid are 60 or more. Have you seen a 60-year-old changing their mind? It's not going to happen. What will happen is if we show we can improve, if we convince those that are not decided that we are right, the movement that says that everything we do is wrong, so we should no longer exist, is not going to grow. It's not going to be strong, and that's the point. Besides, the point is also to regenerate an institution, to make a new sense of it, making it more attractive, to add more people and to renew the people of any institution, not only Aapresid. Great. And now, there we have Jorge. Now, anything can happen. Now, let's talk about it. This is very interesting. I think it's important to listen to everybody's opinion.
No, ellos también, ojo, pará, esto es importante, Los que se quejan de Aapresid se supone que...
Those that complain the microphone is not audible.
Pero la pregunta mía era que da la sensación que el que comunica violentamente hoy parece que tuviera razón. No sé si...
Pareciera.
No, dice que no se escuchó. ¿Se escuchó? Sí.
Sí, impecable. ¿Se escuchó, no? Sí, acá llegó bien.
Violence, cognitively speaking, is, well, let me give you an example. When they did that same setting to patients in a coma, I don't now remember the author, but if you wish, you send an email to me, lisandrobregant@gmail.com. I can look for the source and I forward it. When there is an interruption on on an expected sequence, when there is a tearing of attention, when someone screams. It's like I'm seeing what is happening. It's a conservation thing. As it seems, why don't you please fill in the blanks of that phrase? It seems that that those who communicate violently communicate better. They shout. The point is, it is not the only way to go, but it might be the best known. Michelle Obama, in one of her interviews, she speaks about childish communication, talking about Trump. It's cheap, it's not very elaborated, but there are possible pathways. Such as I mentioned, a technical possibility, there are others as well. But it seems, and it actually is very effective. I've just used it. It's to stress. You stress on words and whatnot. Since I'm more relaxed, I don't insult. You said, or I may have misunderstood you, that, well, we mixed things. There's 7 million votes. He was voted. You didn't hear me. This is why I'm asking. But what do you want to know? The fact that he uses this method of communication, I don't like it as a citizen, but that's the way he is. And I have to accept him as a president. Then I will cast my vote in the upcoming elections. I have nothing to say. Since you address it to Lisandro in person, I will give you some context. In having a conversation with Ivo, people said that he was a freak, a clown. He was underestimated. We had to laugh at him. And overnight, in the system, in the red circle, there was representation. He had 7 million votes. So such as we have to see people. And from a technical perspective, people are more important than organizations, because this is the way we can relate when we are overwhelmed or saturated with information. We have to also think how these people can put together a community. I don't know whether the old trick was the one that was started by Aapresid or not, but in Millet, well, there's people, very small vectors that bring together a very large community, and this is what it is. We monitored everything and we saw the very high level of underestimation, so it had more to do with that. And let's also remember that we talked about this internally. There's like 200 followers, don't pay any attention. But it's important to see how a person, whether they have followers or not, they enable a conversation in a community. Millet 4 years ago was a panelist in a program at 12 p.m. in Crónica TV. That's irrelevant. What they report, if it is partially true, then that gains a lot of attraction, and that's quite fast. And that's the point as well. The good, the bad. I don't see the good or the bad. I believe we are good, the great majority. And they are bad. And I don't think that they are bad. And many of the things that they say can potentially be true. In the extreme case, many regulatory frameworks are not very nice, and I read them as para-tariff barriers. HB4 for me is harmless. it could be seeded and it could be consumed around the world, yet it continues to be stopped in Europe for consumption. That's not the case of RR or BT. The point is understanding. This is not an issue that has to do with absolutes. There is some truth in what is being reported whenever something gets reported. Good afternoon. I come from the political sciences and international relations field. That is, campaigns, parties, these are issues that get analyzed. We in the political sciences consider this change, that is, not just looking for a political position, but an identity that limits associations among people that have an impact at an institutional level. This is not just Aapresid, it's a phenomenon that is discussed academically. My question here is, in a context where the media work through controversy, when they have an emotional background that is quite broad, how about institutions? What are the tools that they can use in order to install a discussion rather than a battlefield? How do you face this situation, discussions of a person with 250,000 followers that can be retweeted? How can we keep defending or keeping those links that in the end it's a matter of understanding that conflict exists, and that does not necessarily have to go against me? How can communication use tools, or how can institutions take advantage of this space so as not to be so much isolated from this phenomenon? I have the cooperativist logic to say, let's do something every day and let's not react. Together we react more. Aapresid, that is the communicational standard in the last few years. I should also say, well, how can we as an institution react? There was something that had to do with moving. The worst thing that can ever happen is to ask for forgiveness for values, those that you promote. Let's have a different institution, because if we start forgiving or asking for forgiveness actually for our values, then we should be better off if we did something else for a living. This is the discussion. Ask for forgiveness for who you are. That's not conceivable. So in the logic of conflict, not all conflicts are negative, especially when the conflict has to do with the essence of who you are. That's great, but this inbreeding is really quite disturbing for me. I retweet to my brother, to my friends, but it's running in circles. I believe that lots of people follow me, but they all feel like me. They are just like me. There's no one I'm communicating a message to. They will like my message, and I will feel I'm really good, but it's like in the circle. So inbreeding, it generates a lot of noise, and it gives me this feeling in the beginning, but then I realize it's empty. That's how media operate. Those who criticize Aapresid are retweeted by the same ones. But inbreeding doesn't get stopped just because we invite the guy who says that we need to knock down Aapresid, and we hear them and we look at them on their eye. No, inbreeding is stopped when I read what they say. I try to stand on their shoes, and I am sorry I'm insisting, but we have to understand how much sense should this have. The fact that there's a need to hear, because otherwise it's just like you say, we are pluralistic, I hear you, but that is not the case. The clearest case are the mining companies in the 90s. 70% of the business core were devastating local communities. We need to know how to solve this. I need to hear you. I don't see this principle of death in Aapresid or in the agri sector. I don't see it. And I have to work with clients that see me. And you mentioned Ghana, I mentioned Kenya. Nicolas Bronzovic, who is giving interviews, he went on to this transference of no-till there, and he makes this mistake. This won't be recorded. He says, "How did it go?" I asked him, and he said, I did quite well. I believe that mostly they speak in French and in English, but I'm not fluent. How did you go about it? I said. And he said, they needed me and I needed them. This is the maximum principle in communication. We miss sight of it. When I was inside Aapresid, I saw there was no need. A textual from a regional was, I'm no teachers for anyone. This need of, do I really need to understand me to unblock or unlock my negative lobbying? Or should I say, well, this is quite serious. Why don't we keep running after we refuel our tank? There's this need. There's leaders of organizations that hit on this need. They detect it. So I'm not going against farmers. I'm going against those who show hierarchical roles in institutions, those that need to detect experience in the field that I was assigned to is this. How are you doing? Instead of not responding in an aggressive manner, but responding with greater dissemination, additionally or aside from the Congress, communicating knowledge and what is done to the entire society. Isn't it a valid tool that can add more followers? I agree. We first have to go for those that are not persuaded, those that have not bought into this. They need a happy face that will explain them this. The majority of communication focuses on the prior link you have with the person rather than on the message. The reason why we created this panel was that PECO found it hard that there were people that were offline who were friends and they were very kind. And why did they behave like that? And once the window was open, they spoke negatively about the institution. This emotional component is not a minor one. Many do lots of things every day, all the time, and not because of value, but it has to do with our feelings, emotions. It's not minor at all. When I spoke about good things and bad things in the beginning, everything that has to do with knowledge and the link, the knowledge and the link with academia, as we colleagues say, is really wonderful. And this is where I say, long live the media, long live Twitter. Big investigators from universities and from INTA are sharing knowledge that has a lot of value for us, and it makes us all equal. It's a big change that I celebrate thanks to technology in comparison to other times. So I think there's lots of very positive things that are okay, and I won't just leave Twitter because someone had this rush. And it's, as he said, what happens to us, those who are on the same boat and those that are in charge of generating this divide that has absolutely no sense. And those who know, how can you help me? How can we generate conversations? The community that comes to this Congress will start generating conversations. How about this? This is the reason I don't give you the microphone, because I'm old and I forget. It hits me from close. And there is a phrase that I borrowed from someone, and maybe my subconscious is helping me and I don't remember who the owner of the phrase is. I apply it to me. Evidence does not perform belief. You may bathe with scientific papers that applies to the general principles. We have no capacity to take in. We are saturated. We are broken. This is social pain, and also because of our attentional training, the attentional agreements that we have. So even though we have a full predisposition to see the evidence, and no matter how many good science disseminators are out there, that doesn't build belief. Belief is built elsewhere. That goes in a different direction if you want to see results. And it is desirable, but it is not enough. I will say the same thing as he, but for agro. His concept is more general, and I am more interested in the agro discussion. Your question is more general. You're talking about society. 22 years of tax withholdings. They are not harmless. They devastated the sector. When you are transformed, when there is a total transformation of the product input ratio is transformed, there's farmers that got a degree in 2003 and they don't know any other ratio. They had to invest in a context of high inflation, a double exchange rate, tax withholdings, and bans on exports, except for a few months. So it is very logical that there should be a big percentage of the sector that will only be resented. So asking from many participants in the agribusiness ecosystem that they won't be resentful of the state is chimeric. It truly is. We see how they work on a daily basis, the roads they run, where they saw loved ones die. That's the truth. They see the things that could have been purchased, should not have been withheld. 33% of what they harvested for long years, there's no way they won't be resented. So the logic of this withholding that was kind of a theft for them broke the relation, and it broke any agricultural logic that can transcend this. That's oppressive. Being withheld or being withheld 33% of your income is oppressive, and that's the summary. Some do not want to come down to a point where it won't be exclusively speaking about it, and that's understandable at some point. So I don't say there are friends and foes, and I hope you can follow me.
Lógica siente que es el bueno.
Yeah, we all, in our own logic, feel we are the good ones, and we all feel we have a right to be repaired. Well, I'm a child of withholdings. I've been in this since 2003. I think, anyway, that Aapresid has always been a topic in their objectives and ideals, and we're not going to give in as an organization with those ideals and goals that we established to keep being disruptive. I think I was looking at several here from the executive committee, historical members. Many of the things that Ivo and Lisandro mentioned hit hard on us. We are not doing an active listening. We're not listening to the one that says you're wrong. So probably that is where we have to change. We'll have to change our narrative. We were always an institution that was apolitical, which is not true. We were not. We are very political, but we do not follow a given political party. We've always been low profile, and perhaps that is hitting on us, not having been emphatic on those things that bring us together and being silent for that political correction that we always had as an organization, which is okay. Always as an institution, we wanted to influence, or our mandate is to influence on public policies, and probably for 25 or 27, 28, 30 years, we were not strong enough, or we didn't have the connections in order to truly influence on public policies. And perhaps we are at a turning point now where we have to start perhaps shouting louder and starting to be involved in public policies now. We are doing it through the institutions. What I do believe is, like Aapresid, we shouldn't give in our ideals. And I said this today. And truly, we are not going to to ask for forgiveness for what we are. We are going to ask for forgiveness for listening to the others, for protecting the environment, for protecting the soil, or for wanting to produce more with less, for being plural, and sitting here and listen to one another and exchange about what can be the best for Argentina.